The Forge's fire has long gone cold. Under the mountain of Durin's folk, a shadow took our treasured halls. Now it calls us back. Khazad-dûm! Speak, friend, and enter.
We've obviously had some experience playing as Nightwing and playing alongside Nightwing before. Can you tell us a little bit about what this version of Nightwing is like? Is it going to be familiar to previous iterations that we've seen in the Arkhamverse, which I know it's kind of like separate and that kind of stuff, but obviously there is a touchstone there. How does he play and what does he bring to the dynamic in Gotham Knights?
I would say compared to other superhero games with similar types of combat, Nightwing is maybe one of the more familiar because of his long reach. His specialty is switching between targets. He's a very aerial hero out of the ones we have, and a lot of his moves focus on that get back up into the air and deal lots of damage. So there's aspects of familiarity there. But also all of the moves that we've brought to the fight for him are pretty unique to the game, and also our quickfire patterns with the wrist arts. I don't think players have had that much flexibility in how they target and with what before. So it'll be familiar-ish to onboard, but also quite new.
Is it tricky to have characters that have such diverse styles operating in the same kind of space? Because you have a character like Nightwing, and obviously he's got a background as a gymnast and a performer, and you obviously want to represent that in his fighting style. But then you have, I don't know, like Red Hood, who's not that. Like, how do you kind of create, is it difficult to create a kind of like cohesion between them? How do you approach that when you know that one player is probably going to be flying all over the place and the other one's probably just going to be like moving around, gunning people down and that kind of stuff?
What we found is that if people play together, cohesion happens in the same way as if you were two people trying to get into an elevator. Like you both have very powerful verbs at your disposal regarding, regardless of who you're playing. So whether you're playing Red Hood or Batgirl, your verbs are very different, familiar, but different than what Nightwing does. And as a result, you kind of develop a different rhythm when you play with somebody who's using that hero because of the way they move around the arena, and also how you choose targets and how you choose to cooperate with them as well.
Interesting. In terms of like narrative, Fleur, obviously you have one of the big things that is exciting people is the Court of Owls and that element being included in Knights. And obviously Dick was at one point being kind of trained, or they had their eyes on him to be one of the Talon. Does that factor into the Nightwing? Is that history there for the Nightwing, or he has a deep connection with the Court of Owls before I guess William Cobb became the Talon? How much does that play into your version of the story?
So, as we've always said, like our story is really, yes, it is taking inspiration from a variety of the comics, but it's really original. So it's you will find some threads of other things, but it's not directly linked to any of it. Just like when we're talking about how Batgirl got injured, it's not exactly in the same way as what we've known before. So you shouldn't be expecting to find exact follow-ups of previous stories in the Batman verse.
Yeah,
I guess
like a lot of those background things are canon, and we've selected elements of each to build the web for our story and for the background for each one of our heroes and how it impacts different elements of Gotham.
Cherry. Sorry.
Right. No, I was gonna say, how do you actually select what you want to keep and what you want to kind of like not keep? Because obviously it must be tricky knowing that if we have this element of it, people might be attached to this thread and they might not be able to create that distinct. It becomes harder to kind of tell yourself and that it's a different, unique story when you keep seeing elements of the original appear in or another story appear in your thing. So how do you strike that balance where it's like we're inspired by, we're not that thing?
I think we have the same creative challenge as a lot of the people who work with this amazing, deep DC IP around Gotham City. And it sounds challenging. It was really fun for us. We kind of focused on what were the touchstones we wanted for each hero to make them really different from each other, both for gameplay inspiration reasons and also for like how they interact with each other in the story and what their personal growth moments were going to be throughout the story. And I think we've done a fun job of it. So you'll see elements that spark familiarity, and as you play, you will also see some moments that maybe players have never experienced before, even if they're really hardcore DC fans.
Yeah, and I think it all boils down to, at some point for the narrative team, it was what is coherent when you're looking at each of the four, but also their story together, plus the overarching story of the game. And I think they did an actually awesome job.
Yeah, I'd love to dig a bit deeper on that kind of the story element of it. Can you talk a bit about how that unfolds? You obviously have a main story that you're telling, but then each individual character presumably has their own arc that they go on. Do they have like individual arcs for themselves, and then also like a shared arc with other characters who, depending on who you pair them with? How do you kind of take these narrative threads and weave them together, and what is the objective with that? It must be like super complicated.
It's really a matrix of possibility for the players. The complexity ends up happening when players put it all together themselves. Creatively, it wasn't that complex for us because we wanted you choose which hero you go through the story with. You can switch if you decide you want to play with somebody else. But generally speaking, you're experiencing it through the storyline of whoever you're playing in the game. And there are moments that are unique to your hero, sort of like impacting the character's emotional journey, I would say, through the game. But when you go on to a main story beat, there are slight differences in the storytelling of like who says what, but everybody goes on the same adventure and everybody overcomes the same challenges in the game. And that's where it really kind of ties everything back to a single path, which allows us to provide a really solid experience for the story that we wanted to tell.
And you might have seen me laughing when Jeff was saying creatively it wasn't a challenge. I was laughing just because I was thinking about Wilson, our cinematic
director would have me in a headlock.
Yes, exactly. Because of course, like as Jeff was saying, although all of them are going on the same adventure, whether you are, especially when you're interacting with certain known characters of the world, depending on who you're playing, they have completely, pretty different conversations. So for our cinematics team, it meant creating literally 4 versions of each of the cinematics. So that was a bit of a challenge.
And the heroes are not the same size. I'm sorry, Wilson. I shouldn't have said it was you.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what does that mean for like narrative beats? Because in my mind, I'm like, presumably there's going to be a point where, I don't know, Red Hood is not getting on with Grayson and they don't want to be near each other. How does the game deal with 2 players controlling them being like, no, I want to play as Red Hood and I'm going to play as Nightwing because they're who I main? But is there ever a moment where it's like, how do you approach an idea where it's like we need these two to not be near each other, but players are going to want to play them and put them together. So how do you approach something like that?
So we try to create not situations like that, first of all.
Okay.
But yes, they do have different kinds of relationship depending on who is with whom, but it's never coming to a point where we would have to tell the player, no, you can't play in co-op with Red Hood today because no, you're mad at him.
Yeah, we always want to allow our players to act out and to play the game the way they want to play. That's always been a pillar of the project for us. So even though there are beats in the story where there's some angry tension between individuals in the story, when you take the controls and you play with a friend, you can either act out that angry tension or not.
All right. Obviously, like for me, like one of the most, I think like for a lot of fans of superhero teams, it's always like one of the most interesting moments is when there's that narrative beat where it's like, oh no, are they going to break up? So I guess you're not able to have that kind of tension in this, but you are coming at it bringing different kinds of tension in that. Can you talk a little bit about how you do explore the idea of tension when you have these individual characters that are so different but also need to be together always?
I don't want to give away too much of the story. I'll just say in a response to the question that our characters are always in Gotham, and the heroes don't always agree with their perspective on different characters in Gotham that they have to interact with. Some people will think that they should trust so-and-so, and some people are like, I'm not really into trusting so-and-so. It impacts the storytelling in that way.
Mm-hmm. Final question I have to ask.
Elle va devoir faire face aussi pour trouver un moyen de les traverser sans se faire dévorer. On écrit nos chapitres un peu comme des épisodes. Cette impulsion qu'on a quand on regarde une série, la retranscrire en jeu vidéo, c'était essentiel pour nous.
C'est une technique d'écriture assez large. C'est vraiment une architecture globale qui vient rythmer tout le jeu, et bien sûr la narration vient se coller à ça au plus près. Alors chaque fois avec des challenges différents, parce que sur les phases d'exploration, on a toute la liberté au niveau des dialogues, etc. Parce qu'on sait que dès que le joueur va rentrer dans une phase de combat, là il va être beaucoup plus focalisé sur ce qu'il est en train de faire. Donc c'est à nous de pondérer, de se dire ok, ce qui est important, on va aller le raconter plutôt ici. Là, on va laisser faire le gameplay, et donc tout ça, ça se fait avec Kevin. Enfin voilà, c'est une discussion qui est permanente au fil de 3 ans de production, constamment de faire évoluer le jeu autour de ça.
You should sit down.
Oh, so that's all you have to say? Come on. You can do better than that. You have a whole garrison here, why don't you really let yourself go?
Stop.
No! Do you see the situation we're in? We were just supposed to get herbs.
Faire plein de projets nous a obligés à avoir des outils à la fois à la pointe de la technologie, mais très modulables. Et le fait d'avoir par exemple notre équipe engine à la maison, ça nous permet d'aller les voir directement et dire on a un challenge relatif au jeu qu'on est en train de développer et il nous faut un moyen de le solutionner. Et ça permet d'atteindre des prouesses comme par exemple les gigantesques hordes de rats qu'on voit déferler sur les villes dans les trailers ou des choses comme ça.
Mais après, on a vu aussi nos faiblesses à certains endroits, notamment, puisque il a fallu s'en rendre compte, hein, les cinématiques qui demandaient une logistique très lourde. Donc en fait, on a vraiment investi sur un studio motion capture qui nous appartient et qui nous a permis d'avoir une énorme flexibilité en termes de tournage.
I don't know what's happening to me, Lucas. I feel my mind going.
Donc Olivier de Rivière, notre compositeur, c'est quelqu'un qui amène énormément de choses dans le jeu. Et donc il arrive et il a plein d'idées. Et là, on parle vraiment d'émotion, on parle vraiment de comment colorer des scènes donc avec de la musique.
Et il y a des moments où il nous sort des compositions incroyables. Et on regarde le level en face ou la séquence en face, on se dit tiens, c'est super ce qu'il a fait, mais nous on n'est pas au niveau du coup.
Hey, there's one over here! The sun is high in the sky. Green fields keep rolling, oh, they keep on rolling by. I'm leaving tonight. I'm going home to the place where I belong. Oh, I'm leaving. I'm going home.